I have a document that I keep specifically for the different manufacturers and their solutions. And as I hit those kind of gotchas along the way, I make a bullet point note and I update my overview document that I send out. And I find usually if I can keep that to a page, that's much more likely to get read than the 12-page document that has all the details in it.
You just use like 4-point font or something, right?
No, I try to stay in like the 8 to 10 range, hence the glasses.
Don't you quote that small print at me. For every sentence of small print you produce, I can produce smaller.
What do you need to know, and how does virtual control differ from traditional projects? How does it impact programmers? All that and more on A State of Control. A State of Control, episode 121, Virtual Control. Welcome to A State of Control, an AVNation podcast that highlights the control programming and automation aspects of the audiovisual industry. My name is Steve Greenblatt. I'm your host. Thanks for joining us today. Today's topic, we're going to talk about virtual control. So I'll get into the definition of that and talk about what that means to us. But I got some great guests for us to talk to, and they're friends of the show, and we're going to say hi to them. But before we do, we got to welcome and say hi to my partner here, Uncle Richie, Rich Fregosa. How are you, Rich?
I'm doing good. Actually, you get to see the sausage being made a couple of shows ago. Actually, I don't think I ever spoke about it. During the storms, my office flooded and missed literally by about 6 inches, losing everything in the office. And so the construction has just finished in the space, but not in time to make it not look like an embedded job site. So the only thing that's missing is me sitting on a paint bucket in here. But other than that, I'm good because I'm finally back in my office. So good to see you. And actually, I'm excited to have our two friends on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, you could have fooled me. I thought maybe it was a good virtual background, but
that was it.
But yes, we have two good friends, and they've been on the show quite a bit, and I know that they're going to have really great things to say. And the first was last with us on episode 118, which was just a couple episodes ago, and he brought all these great ideas and topics. So I said, if we're going to use one of your topics, you got to come and talk. So his name is Brian Magrogan. He's from Verrex. Welcome back, Brian.
Hi, Steve. Hi, Rich. Thank you guys so much for having me. This is one I've been working on recently, so I'm very excited to talk about more virtual control stuff. So thank you for having me. Last
but not least, he was last with us on episode 112, and that's too long ago, but we got him back, and we're going to keep him close by. He's Mike Krejci. He's from CTI, and I got to see him in person recently, so that was a nice treat. Welcome back, Mike.
Thanks, Steve. Glad to be back. Glad our schedules finally aligned and I could join up. Good to see you, Brian. And Rich, always a pleasure, sir.
So as I mentioned at the top, virtual control, let's talk about what that means. So we're talking about software-based control more than hardware-based control. And when we say that everything lives on hardware in some place, but the hardware traditionally is local to the room, it's proprietary, and usually it's one controller per room, not always, but usually. So that does sound familiar because our industry has changed and the world has changed to a lot more software products. So why not control? Video conferencing has become control-based. We do a lot more over the network, and that's become widely adopted. But the question is virtual control something that this industry has really embraced? The pandemic kind of forced people to get into it. But Rich, tell us, what's your thought here? Is this something that was just a nice to have at the time, or is this something that's here to stay?
I think that it's going to be client driven more than anything else. A big part of, what was originally happening during the analog days was that you'd put in a system, you'd have a 5-year window where you'd start looking at the refresh. By about the 10-year point, you're talking complete redo, swapping up and moving generations. And that's just kind of how the analog world worked. And it was expensive. It was not a small undertaking, which is why it took forever to get to that point. Even if you remember in the tech industry, the government was still running on circa late 80s computers because to change out hundreds of thousands of devices is no small task. And it just the logistics of it. And so when you are looking at a campus, you're looking at an enterprise situation. And those are the big ones, right? But it's going to it's always that trickle down where when end users find out that they're dealing with soft solutions as opposed to hard solutions, they start looking and going, well, yeah, I mean, I know we only have 10 conference rooms, but isn't it really kind of the same thing from a scaling standpoint? And so I think that the integrators, because it's again, it's a new tool bag that you need to have. Integrators are going to enter it. They'll be dragged into it more than they will dive into it, because it requires a skill set that isn't plugging in a VGA cable. It isn't plugging in an HDMI cable. It's not, a couple of 3.5 millimeters, headphone jacks and stuff. So the way that we've done things, even just, here's the control box, and here's some relays, and here's this, and here's that. I mean, it's a paradigm shift, and I don't try to use that too often, but it does represent that paradigm shift where, because we've moved away from physical control of devices and they become more soft-based, the lead-in into it is becoming more soft-based as well. And that's changing people who've been doing things a certain way for 25, 30 years. So, I mean, it's inevitable, just because you're seeing that there are solutions and you can get longevity, you've got upgradability, you've got flexibility, and I view it for integrators as an opportunity to be more close to their clients than they were in the past, because you can roll out a version 1.2, a version 2.0, or anything like that. Where in the old days, it was like, yeah, I know you bought this $5,000 PTZ camera and that's just going to be it for the while, or you bought this and you're just kind of done. You don't hear from them, or the only time you hear from them is a problem. So we're going to see it, but there's a whole new set of problems that come with it. And there's a whole new set of skills and troubleshooting. And, now when you have to tell a technician who's out there, do you know if they hardened the server to be able to run the software? And they're like, well, it's got a metal case around it. We're good, right? I mean, that's really, the issues is that, you could have a field tech visually inspect something and be able to go, aha, that's the problem. You're now on a completely different tool set where you are working more closely with IT and everything else. So, yeah, long answer for the short part. Heck yeah, it's happening. Be ready.
Brian, I'll let you take it from there. Obviously, bringing up this topic means that it's something that you've probably been experiencing and perhaps living through, hopefully good experiences. But tell us what impact this has had from your perspective in approaching a project, and why is it something that really needs to be talked about?
Well, when I was reading ahead of time and kind of just taking some notes around, I think one of the things that always comes up, and it actually kind of scares me every time I see it on a project, while I love it and I am embracing it, is, did people have the right conversations up front? And I think that really, truly makes the project successful. There was a shift, call it 15-ish years ago or so, where we had to have more network conversations with people, and we had to find the right players, and there was a good 4 or 5 years where that didn't happen, and all of a sudden at the last minute you're scrambling, and this doesn't work because it can't plug into the network, or that doesn't work. And now we have that same thing, but in a different world, not necessarily a different world per se, but a different team, right? I've got to get with the right people on the client side for virtualization or for hardware to, get approved to put that on their network, or to deploy it into their VM environment. And so that's been kind of the next set of challenges. So first thing, as soon as I see it on a project, at the kickoff meeting, I raise my hand and ask the sales guy, did you just give them the cut sheet and say, this is what we need? Or did you have a meaningful, honest conversation with them of, this takes a partnership and this takes time to do. This is not I bring in a box and I plug it into your network, and away you go. So it has been exciting, and it has also been scary at the same time. So, and I think, Rich, to touch on one of the things you said, this world can be scary, right? People have to learn new skill sets to stay relevant and to be able to properly install, troubleshoot, and that piece can be really scary. So, when my guys are concerned, or when they've got issues, I like to just give them a VM. I give them a VirtualBox VM, right? It's free. They can spin it up, play with it, and kind of get more familiar and feel better about it. So I found myself doing that a lot. So I've been thinking about switching my house to virtual control recently. So we'll see where that goes.
Mike, I'll bring you into the conversation. Scary usually doesn't sit well with clients. So, what are some of the reasons why a client should be considering virtual control, aside from the fact that they can get a solution done when hardware isn't available?
So I think virtual control, right, is still in its infancy stages here in AV, right? It's not grown outside of just a handful of manufacturers. So I think there's an edginess to going to virtual control, right? Whether it's the bleeding edge, I don't think it's the bleeding edge anymore, but we're on the front edge of getting ready to adopt it. And I think there's a level for when a client customer should take advantage of it. If this is mom and pop's, chiropractic office, is there really a necessary for them to go virtualized with one conference room? I'm not sure, right? There's an argument to be had there. If you're building an entire headquarters and you're going to build 10, 20 stories of buildings on the building, and they're all going to be the very similar conference room, and you're going to have 200 conference rooms, and I can spin up 200 conference rooms in a matter of clicks or an API call, I think then it makes more sense when we're dealing at scale, when we're dealing with similar systems. But I don't think it's for everyone, right? Part of it is the scariness, the conversations that have to happen. And I had those with Brian years ago in his previous life with end users about getting servers on their network and getting those to talk to all their services. It's not for everyone. There's going to be clients that don't want anything to do with it. Large clients, you say a server and they go, whoa. But if you say, oh, this black box that's an appliance that is running, a Linux OS on it, they go, okay, that's fine. And it's a simple, it's about each client customer a little bit differently. They're not all cookie cutters, and we can't do them all the same, I think.
I think you bring up an interesting point there too, Mike, at the end of a black box is much more tangible. Even though they don't know what's inside that box, this is a tangible object that is here that is going to be placed on your network. And I think we have seen more adoption recently because some of the manufacturers have offered, here's a pre-built PC with your virtual control on it. And it becomes, again, a tangible object that I can put in the room and install, even if it is only just for that room. We've only just switched the label on the black box in that scenario. So I think that a lot of the people that I work with need that tangible thing, and software is not as tangible to them.
And I think from the sales side as well, the people who've been our sales team and that have been selling for however many years in AV industry, they are built to sell black boxes parts, whether that's a display, a mount, a projector, a wall plate, a transmitter, receiver, and a control processor, an audio DSP. It's easy for them to say, I'm selling you this, and there's a set cost on this piece of metal with electronics in it, and there's a warranty on this piece of metal with electronics on it, rather than here's a license key, we're going to install some software, and if it goes up in smoke, I don't know how you solve it, right? And that's the problem that I think is from the sales side, is they They would rather sell a black box because then it's a physical thing they can take, deliver, hand off, and give their customer an
Yeah.
actual piece that has value rather than just a
Yeah,
code.
and you said something else in there too, a license key, right? We're growing more and more towards or away from perpetual licenses, right? And things that have to be licensed yearly or every 3 years or 5 years, however that manufacturer decided. And I think our industry is still catching up to that model. I get the license expiration emails 90 days out, 120 days out, and I immediately flip it to our service team and our GMS salespeople. So they have it right away. I can get a quote out to somebody to renew that, but I think that sometimes still is a little foreign to people, even though right in the email it is, you have 25 licenses expiring on this date, you need to renew these licenses. And it still is a little bit odd to them at points. So helping them through that transition as well is something that we can do.
Rich, we're talking, I think, a lot about IT stuff. It sounds like, and we've always said that that's really what our industry is about these days. Is it time now for us to be more have more IT focused people to be able to do these types of solutions? Is it I think we're kind of straddling the fence by saying that boxes are nice, but we're really in the IT industry.
I think that if you don't necessarily have the full-time need for a staff person, this is when partnerships help. And honestly, and sadly, it really is going to depend where your solution is being delivered, because you have different IT requirements. Mike's explanation of, hey, this little chiropractic office with 3 offices in 3 nearby cities is going to have a far different need for IT and for security and for checks and for I mean, obviously I don't think you're going to worry about ISO over or FTC rules over in a chiropractic office, right? But if you're dealing with a bank, if you're dealing with the university, if you're dealing with any secure situation, your first team is going to be the one that's there because you're going to have to educate them more likely than not. So do you bring somebody in who is the interpreter for that? Possibly. It's great to partner with people who are absolute IT experts. I know when I need help, I put that call out when I know it's way above my pay grade, but there are requirements that we still have. And I think that as AV over IP is becoming more ubiquitous, and we start getting those questions about how do you get it from site A to site B? How do you get it from the campus-wide situation? So in a smaller scale, you can all keep it contained into one switch, right? Maybe 2 switches, right? 2 different IDEs, and it's self-contained. You still got your own network boxes typically. But when you start going out in an enterprise or a campus or something like that, there's no way they're going to let you put 40 switches in 40 different buildings and have your very own backbone. They're going to say, you're using our stuff. This is how it's got to work. You can't mess up what we've got going on, and we want all this done. And so that's where the willingness to grow out. And again, not every integrator is going to do 300 classrooms. So you've got to, and I think Brian made a great point, is that is that sometimes you're just going to have a box, and it's okay to still have the box. You can be forward thinking and scale, but the requirements are going to be, if you're still hoping to stay within the little boxes there, you can work with your manufacturers. You can work with switches that are designed for AV over IP. IPMX is coming up. That's going to add a whole new set of rules to deal with and interoperability. Let's put it this way. If you're used to just going to, if your thought was that you can go ahead to the nearest security distributor and pick up a $300 switch and put 2 of those in there in an access point, and that's your idea of networking, you're definitely going to need to step up your game, because that's not going to work for you anymore. You do have to at least have the bare essentials, and the bare essentials today are far different than the bare essentials even 5 years ago. And so if you're going to stay in this world, you need to figure out one way or the other. Either you learn enough and you go through manufacturer's training, you pick manufacturer partners that are a little bit more AV friendly, or you use trusted IT solutions that are out there, tech solutions that are out there. And then you're going to need a specialist, because then you're dealing with somebody who is used to day in and day out with, credentials for 300 employees and 2FA requirements and everything else. You're going to need somebody who can speak all those acronyms. And then and I know several of the integrators I work with, when they get past a certain point, they make a call and their IT partner comes in to help keep everybody together and keep the communication going. I mean, first and foremost, like Brian said, you get with everybody who is a stakeholder, right? And IT, the CTO, if you're doing something that big, their CTO should be in on that meeting, and if not, and at least if not, the director who's underneath them, because it's not a small thing.
And you get the right people involved too, Rich, right? And you get their buy-in. And you might have the guy a couple rungs down the chain that doesn't like it. But when he's told this is going to happen, you've got to figure it out. That's a whole different world of, instead of us trying to push up and go upstream, when we're coming downstream, it's a lot easier battle, right? And battle's the wrong term there, right? But it's a lot easier when they're being told, we're going to make this happen. We know there's going to be some pain points and some growing pains there, but we don't want you to just come in as the naysayer and no, you can't put this on our network. So it really depends on finding the right stakeholder.
And you've got to be flexible. I mean, I'll bring up a story. Last week, we did a series of apartment complexes, and we were dealing with the company who was the high-speed provider. So they were the internet provider. They had their switches. They were and we were dealing with the public spaces, not the residences, but it's all still one network. And so the guy who is responsible for making changes to the switches over there is not going to be happy to have to do more stuff for the AV guy. So absolutely, the buy-in has to be, it's coming, it's happening. I know you don't like it, but we've all got to play together. But you have to start learning how to play well with some other people, or at least give them solutions to say, if you don't want to make changes there, then we have something here, but that's up to you because it's your site. And then they go, and then you're dealing with the decision makers who say, no, that's silly. Why would we do that? I've got guys here. There's nobody who's sitting there typing at a port level who's going to say, yeah, give me more stuff to make that could possibly go wrong, right?
I mean, I have a document that I keep specifically for the different manufacturers and their solutions. And as I hit those kind of gotchas along the way, I make a bullet point note and I update my overview document that I send out to include, a variation on that of, hey, this is a hard requirement. And if we can't get this, here are alternatives, or we have to look at a different solution. So, and I find usually if I can keep that to a page, that's much more likely to get read than the 12-page document that has all the details in it. And I put right in there, we can see more details about this, but here's the high level overview. And I find that gets a lot more traction. People are happier with that. It doesn't take up as much of their day to read through that. So
you just use like 4-point font or something, right?
No, I try to stay in like the 8 to 10 range, hence the glasses.
Mike, want to get your take on this? What are programmers? Because programmers are a lot of our audience. What impact does this have on them, and what do they need to know? If they have or they're planning on working in a virtual control project.
I think the biggest thing for them that's a learning curve is servers. We never had to get into the back end of a black box, right? Whatever manufacturer gave us a pretty interface or some sort of SSH interface, an API that we could get in and do our 5 things, and they put guardrails on us. When we're with virtual control, the guardrails are gone. We're setting up things that can break now. We're setting up Linux servers. Rich was talking earlier before the call about having a computer with multiple network interfaces on it. Well, if you do that wrong in Linux, things just stop working. We still need to connect to multiple networks and multiple devices, but if you set that up wrong, nothing's going to talk. And then you're now troubleshooting servers and not troubleshooting code. Or you're trying to troubleshoot code when it's really not the code that's broken. It's, the server config we did wrong. Linux isn't that complicated compared to, some things we've done, but it's a different mindset. It's something that, the people who've been doing AV forever and not into computers just kind of lucked into it from being in a band. They might not know how to be a server admin. They might not know how to go tweak with their computer. They were an audio guy, not a computer guy. It's kind of, luckily having a big bench on my team, we've got a couple guys that are really good at, at the Linux side, the server side, who, someone gets stuck, they go, that guy needs to help me. And you wave out the flag, and then the right person comes to help you. But that's an advantage we have of, our size and our scale that not every integrator has. And like Rich said, you have to call in the right team. You have to call in those people. And it may be having, a more server type person on your staff now to help with things. They're part of the programming team, but they might not be an actual programmer, actually making the AV part work. They're more working on that server side. And that's the first thing I think that's the most important. The second is we now have the ability where we don't have to write 10 programs for 10 rooms. Yep. So I think it's a mind shift of programmers to look at 10 systems and go, what's the differences between these? Can I program them with one program and just have a config file that changes, what the room name is, how many inputs there are? And it's a mind shift of programming to now program for scalability. So I'm only loading one program instead of 10. I can just run that same program 10 times, and my work now got really easy.
I think you bring up a good point, Mike, in that this is where you can set yourself apart from your competitors. Because again, let's think about who this show is for, right? We've got smaller integrators, third-party programmers, programming-only houses, somebody who may be part of a team of a large company or not. But this is, we talk about, the kind of the base of what we do. There's no secret sauce to it. There really isn't, right? There's just stuff goes in, stuff goes out. But for me, again, kind of coming from, the whole art background that I've got, I'm like, this is when you make it sexy, right? This is when you make it's like, this is when you walk up to somebody who doesn't even know what the system goes, and you want to see something cool, and it's there. And that's where I feel, oddly enough, you're getting away from custom, but at the same time, you're bringing back the sexiness of it, where you're able to go, this is cool. This is, this is the rock and roll element of what we do. And you can start focusing on what's heard, seen, and touched again, right? And really that's the whole key, is getting back to it allows you to take your budget and focus on user experience rather than debugging, I think, sometimes. And, we were talking earlier, like we're in the middle of ourselves of a refresh of just kind of how our framework's coming out. And those are kind of the questions, like, okay, we still have bespoke, but what can we take from bespoke and go ahead and find a way? And there's been some programming companies who are doing that already and doing a very good job of it, right? Where they're pushing out virtually 1,000 boardrooms, but they've spent years developing it, and not quite a small amount of money, and they got a lot of people working on it, on skunkwork stuff, right? If you don't have the kind of company where you can have a skunkwork team, then you've got to find a way, that Mike was saying, which was like, how can I make this an 80% with just 20% of changes. And that's where that's where I think the meat of the virtual side comes in, right? Which is you can get your 80% done, and then you can get in, you can get out, and get paid.
Yep. And I think a lot of times that's hard for people to understand up front, Rich. And it's not until all of a sudden we hit the service side, right? And like, we want this 1 or 2 tweaks to these 30 rooms. And if you've done it right up front and you've taken that little bit extra time, it's great. I'm going to update one code base, right? I've got to update one server for a security patch, and I'm done, right? And I know that code base has been deployed, tested, works well, and any issue that I might run into, I know where to start looking right away, and I know that it's everywhere. So I feel like, when I'm trying to, push something like that, I also try to keep track of the time of, here you go, yeah, we might spend a little more time here, but on the back end, my service guy that had to roll a truck, instead of having to go there for an entire day, right, or instead of having to go there multiple times, he spent half the day there, right? We got to do the whole upgrade, and you took a couple hours of my time instead of taking a couple days of my time to update 20 different code bases. So the benefits become exponential, and it's getting people to understand that and see it and grasp it.
And I think, the tools now are better than they were 5-10 years ago for making that configuration and those customizations possible. The tools for dealing with files were not great years ago. There was no real parsing of them, no nice pretty way to just say, oh, that's a this thing on that file. And, whether that's been moving to more modern languages where we can deal with JSONs or XMLs if you wanted, or web services, whatever that is, or I'm going to, do a plug for Steve here and the tools that Control Concepts have done of their JSON tool for Crestron, their new tool for QSYS has made, it easy and adaptable for the non-advanced programmers to be able to do that. We've seen the uptick in configuration codes for some of our even non-super programmers just because there was an easy tool to do it now. And I think those help that our audience, the programmers, go, oh, I don't have to hard code in a room name now. I can just use this file, this module.
Yep. I think that also, too, on the business aspect of it, makes it a little bit easier, right? If maybe you don't have that skunkworks team, like Rich said, to say, okay, right, this is a CapEx expense. I'm going to buy this one time for $1,000 or for $500 or whatever, and we're going to get this out of it, right? Instead of, I can't dedicate my guys to it. I would love to have a guy I could dedicate to it to spend a couple weeks. But so it helps everybody across the board, right? It helps the small people, helps the larger people. And I think, even when you have people working on the same style of tools, when CCI releases a great tool, it also gives you guys some ideas of, oh, this has that. We should integrate that as well. Or, we should work on that. And I think it helps push the whole industry forward, all the programmers out there to understand and to see and to grow their own skill set.
Thank you guys so much for that, because that is actually what our intent is to help everybody do their job better. So thank you so much. But it is true that what I've experienced is that there are those who get it, and then there are those who just don't. It's just not something that is in their world, and I think that more people have to understand, because the time savings is incredible, as you said, Brian, and thank you, Mike, also for driving that point home.
And Brian made a great point in that the time to learn virtual controls is not on your first job where it got sold. But that is how, and again, if we're being honest with how a lot of times these things get handed to us, right? Well, we're not necessarily going to get best into it until we've sold something that needs it. How many times have you heard that from an integrator or from your internal team or your sales team, or right? We don't have the time right now to deal with something we haven't sold. I can guarantee everybody's had that conversation countless times.
Yep.
this is where Brian made the perfect point. You know what? It is a CapEx cost. I don't like buying hardware because I don't sell hardware. But guess what? I've got every, DSP, every, widget, that gets used a lot on projects because I have to spend the time with it here and learn where my weaknesses are with it first before it gets shoved into a rack someplace else and you move on. And so, if you don't have a virtual platform of some port in your office that somebody can tap into and loan it or whatever out, that's your first CapEx expense because you're going to need it. Sooner or later, it's going to happen one way or the other. And there are some pre-built boxes that are already out there. So if you don't want to have to worry about having to build the server and everything else, great, get the pre-built box. At least then you're learning the skills that translate from your old control processor to how you have to think now with the virtualized processors.
Absolutely. And, the other nice piece about that too, right, is, some people used to have 10 physical processors there that their guys could test with, right? Now I've got one virtual box that, so long as it's licensed appropriately, I don't have to ask, hey, are you using this processor? Can I use this? Or am I about to disrupt you? I've got my room. I can load my room. I can do whatever I want with it. My room can screw up and crash my own program, and it doesn't affect the other guy, right? So long as it's deployed properly. On the flip side of that, though, to be very careful, and one of the things that I talk about with people is that one box goes down, and now all of a sudden nobody has anything. So, snapshots, making sure you have redundancy, just the simple things of, crap, that went down. Need 10 minutes. Let me restore the latest snapshot, pull it back up, and away you go. So, those things too can also then help show your service team, help show your executives how valuable it is that things break, right? It does happen, but when it happens, we can get up and running a lot faster.
Is that one point of failure a concern we have with virtual control, right? As we're deploying it on an enterprise, and it's not, it takes the one conference room going down versus potentially a building or a campus going down.
That can get scary, right? For sure. Again, I think one of the things there really becomes finding that right stakeholder and having the conversation ahead of time, which again is why I am enjoying getting away from the individual black box, right? Put it in their VM environment, whatever they use, ESXi, hypervised, whatever they're using up in Azure, in AWS, and let them deal with the redundancy, right? And then on our side of things, okay, here's what we need from a backup plan, right? We need snapshots at, week intervals or whatever you want so that we can roll back if required. Or, I think as these platforms mature even more, you're going to see the ability to run multiple side by side and fail over, and one will pick up the load of the other one, just like some of the other management products that have been around for a long time that have evolved and have that. So I think that'll get better as the need. Some major client will drive it, right? Whether it be a government site, whether it be, a main enterprise that says, I want to deploy this and I want to buy 5,000 licenses from you, but it has to have this. And then they're going to go back to not the drawing board necessarily, but they're going to go back to the engineers and say, you got 6 months, make this work. So, and we'll have growing pains there again too, but I think that'll happen. That does think of another piece in my mind too, though, right? From a serviceability standpoint, if you need to update that server, you're about to take down all those rooms. We now become even further ingrained in the IT change requests. This has to happen outside business hours. This isn't, I'm going to book a single room from 12 o'clock to the end of the day, 5 o'clock to do my updates. I'm about to do this. So setting the appropriate expectations of this has to happen after hours, right? And also thinking about an enterprise deployment, we want something centralized to local time zones so that I don't have just a server sitting on the East Coast running stuff in APAC. And, all of a sudden, although that might be nice for me working Eastern hours, be able to work on APAC overnight or there overnight, but just being careful about that in that architecture. But again, we can really leverage their IT people to talk about that because they're already used to doing it. right? They have to do it for all different pieces of their environment. So, it gets us in even more, which is nice as well.
That's probably a good place for us to stop, although this is a great conversation and it makes me think that we need to have another episode. So stay tuned for that. But until we get to that point, I'd like to thank my guests and our guests for being here today and really giving us great education and some very insightful information. First off, Brian Magrogan, who was the one who shared this topic, and please continue to give more topics to us like this. Brian's from Verrex. How can people get in touch with you and learn more about Verrex?
As Uncle Richie would say, you can find me on the interwebs, any of the social medias, @bmagrogan. You can find Verrex at verrex.com, and we'd love to help you with any of your integration design needs. And I will certainly keep sending you topics, Steve, as they pop into my head. Usually it's like 2 o'clock in the morning when I can't sleep, so they're always fun. But thank you for having me.
My mailbox is always open. Appreciate that. And Mike Krejci, who we're going to need to have back more often as well. He's from CTI. How can people find out more about you and CTI?
Yeah, you can go to cti.com. Just a reminder, AVNation is a CTI company. So there's the disclaimer, Mitchell. You can go to cti.com. You can find me anywhere on the socials at the Mike Krejci. That's the best way to find me. LinkedIn, Twitter. Find me there or cti.com.
Excellent. And Rich, another great topic, another great conversation, and never enough time. But how could people get in touch with you, continue this dialogue, and find out what you're up to?
Well, first, if virtual sided control is something that you're interested in, reach out to these two guys. They're actively doing it. The SMEs, always look for the SMEs who show up, right? The subject matter experts. These are the people who I call when I'm in the weeds. So just so know that part. The first thing I say is check in with these guys. They love helping out. It's why I think we all like doing these shows, because we're trying to reach out for people who feel like they're alone and stuck in the weeds, and you really aren't. You're available. But if you want to reach out to me, you can find me on the interwebs, on the socials, at rfragosa, on X, on the Facebooks, all over the place. If you want to find out about the company, fragosadesign.com. But first and foremost, I hope that you find me here on AVNation.tv and our suite of shows that serve our verticals here, along with my partner Steve for State of Control and AV Week and Resi Week and ... And hopefully when you're here, you'll click on those partner links and help support the people who support us.
For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, at controlconcepts.net. And as was very graciously shared, my company does a lot of the building blocks for other programmers, and we want to try to help the industry do more projects, do them easier, and also add more capabilities. So you can take a look at our utility module store, where we have a bunch of free and low cost downloads. So check those out, as well as API integrations that we do with manufacturers. But as Rich said, it's most important that you continue to listen and leave us a rating review. Let us know what you think. And you could do that at avnation.tv. It's a brand new website. You can now look at the content based on topic, and there's a great control section. So go through and check out the website, and really you can get a lot of great information. There's a whole bunch of shows, and there's always more that's being added. So avnation.tv is your place to go, and we look forward to hearing from you and seeing you there. And until next time, this has been A State of Control,
the network for the AV industry.
What are you listening to?
This
is AV.
This
is AV Nation.
This is AV Nation.